Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to Cape Town. And the big promise was that I will see more than in my first 3 days in South Africa. Because up to now I saw wonderful airports, wonderful hotels, sometimes not so wonderful hotels, conference rooms, and not so much light. Because I noticed that it becomes quite late, bright here, and quite early dark. So yeah, I'm happy that I will go. When I go back, it will be spring there, hopefully, not winter. So I wish you more rain, as I learned, and a nice winter time. I will try to explain you a little bit about the European situation. Where do we come from? What are the fancy plans of the European Commission and the Parliament with the next step, with the so-called circular economy? But from the very beginning, I can tell you this, the European Commission at the moment just did the easy part. So they revised the waste legislation. They are still working on the, from my point of view, difficult part to change the production side, to change the behavior side. So besides all these big words that you hear, we are still talking most of the time of improving our waste management. A few words about EXPRA. In the meantime, we are even already 25 members from 21 countries and from Israel and Quebec in Canada. We hope for more, but we have a restriction which avoids that we grow in certain countries and get new members, because we believe, as you will see later, that an EPR system has to be owned by obliged industry and has to run on a non-profit system. I'm very often called a dinosaur because the new world is profit, investors, waste management, vertical integration. We see many examples in Europe, or some examples in Europe, and from my point of view, they do not work as they could work. So in my members are running this old-fashioned, but in a very effective and efficient way, as I will try to explain you later on. Of course, it's not only the obliged industry. We have to have a very good relation to our local authorities, to the other industry groups. So this is a big part of my work and the work of my members as well. As you can see, it's a quite funny group of countries that we join. You see the traditional countries, Italy, Spain, Belgium, all the Scandinavian countries, but we also have members from Macedonia, for example, one of the 100 Balkan countries that you find in the meantime. So you never know when there is a new country independent in the Balkan region. So this is, and they face really big problems, totally different from the rest of Europe, because they have had no real waste management system. They have a big informal sector. Perhaps something sounds quite familiar for you. So they have the Roma and Sinti people, which are totally not interested to be integrated in anything. So big challenges there, and so I think we got a lot of expertise of all the different worlds, I would say, all the different realities. EXPRA is on one side more or less a traditional business association in Brussels. So we are the voice of our members towards the European Commission, the European Parliament, the other stakeholders. So we are promoting our beliefs there, but we have, luckily, a second side as well. As our members are no competitors to each other, we can really work with them. We can really, we have 6 working groups, and we really try to move them, to identify the weaknesses and to help them to close the gaps and to close the loops, which are mainly, we come to this later on, mainly problems in the legislation and in the enforcement in most of the times. In the meantime, the European Commission has identified extended producer responsibility as one of the many, but in the meantime as the key pillars to move the society to a circular economy. Why? Because real EPR system, as I will explain a little bit later, is involving all the different stakeholders. And only by this you can change something, you can move something. OECD is quite active on the EPR file as well. Perhaps you remember in 2001 there was the first guidance for member states, for states, how to implement extended producer responsibility. And last year they made an update on certain topics like governance, competition, informal sector, etc. They published a new book, I think that size. Difficult to read, but the executive summary is great. So, the OECD is promoting EPR in a quite good way as well, because they also believe that only by involving industry, working together with industry, the countries can move a step forward. So not only introducing new taxes, new obligations, new bans, but to work with industry together and then with the rest of society to make a big step forward. In Europe, EPR is usually mixed with different things. So we have to remember that EPR is in first line an individual obligation to a company for its packaging, for its for its cars, for its batteries, forever, for a product that they put on the market. And then they have to think how they can fulfill these responsibility. So for certain products, like for packaging, especially household packaging, it makes sense to join forces with other obliged producers, because it is quite difficult to get your packaging back from your consumers. So very often for the waste management part of the extended producer responsibility, in most of the countries you find joint association, PROs, producer responsibility organizations, that do the job on behalf of the individual obliged companies. But usually you do not transfer all your obligations. So your obligation to work on your product, to make it more environmental friendly, more recyclable, this is staying with the individual obliged company. Again, you can use, if you like, your PRO to help you to work on this. Again, to join forces to find new ways to make the bottles thinner, to change the material, whatever. No? But for us, the obligation in the end stays with the company. So even if when the PRO is doing something wrong, the company is still there and have to take the decision. That's why we say to the companies, you have to be in the board of your PROs. You cannot just sign the check and go away. No, the responsibility will always stay with you. And in an optimum way, we have already, for the packaging here, for example, we have already a circle, if everything runs in the best way. So, and the EPR organization, the responsibility of this is to keep this wheel turning, which is sometimes more easy and sometimes more difficult. And as you see, the whole society is somehow involved in this circle, from the inhabitants to the waste management companies, recyclers, the authorities, and so on. So it is very important to have good relations to all of them. And the difficult thing with EPR is that the system is really working in a good way if everybody is a little bit unhappy, which makes it not very sexy. But it is the way, because if one part is happy, that means an other part of the circle is too unhappy. So if you give too much money to the recyclers, industry is unhappy because they have to pay too much money. If you just follow the sayings of the authorities, the rest of the circle is unhappy as well. So you have to have, as an EPR system, you have to find the balance between all of us. And so in the end, if everybody is a little bit unhappy, then you run a good system. This is the situation in Europe after more than 20 years of a packaging directive. as you can see on the first slide, I think everything looks quite fine. No? Most of the countries are recycling a lot of packaging. You have some countries which still have to do better, like Malta, Romania, and so on. And the red line on top, this will be probably the new minimum recycling target. So everything looks fine, I would say. The same more or less for plastics, as it seems. Everybody is fulfilling the current targets. The next step will, of course, be more difficult, but as you see, Slovenia is claiming to recycle 70% of all the plastics, so wow. If you go to Bulgaria or to Slovenia or to Lithuania, you will start to wonder, because there is not so much infrastructure. So how can they recycle without a real collection system? And so you start to wonder how the countries calculate. So for example, Slovenia, not to blame my member there, the government has a very good idea which packaging or how much packaging is produced in Slovenia. They have more or less no idea about the imported packaged products. So as a government, what would you do? You take the figure you have. So the 100% is just the packaging which is produced, put on the market in Slovenia. If you talk to people, this is about a third of the real packaged product put on the market. So if you divide the 70%, 69% by 3, you come to 23% plastics recycling, and then you say, yes, this makes sense. So one of the big problems that we have at the moment in the European Union is that you cannot compare the figures, because behind every data that the member states send to Brussels, there is a story, and you cannot compare the different stories. So one of the big efforts of the European Commission that they want to do now is to oblige the member states to report and to calculate all in the same way, so that you can compare what they. So the reality looked probably totally different. The same counts for the way how the member states have implemented the packaging directive. The European legislation is totally complex, but the Commission can always choose whether to have a directive or an ordinance. If they choose an ordinance, then the member states have to implement the legislation word by word. If they choose a directive, then they have to fulfill targets. But how to fulfill them, every member state is completely free. And wonder, the 28 member states have implemented the packaging directive in 28 different ways. You will not find one legislation which is identical with the neighboring state. It is amazing how creative member states can be in this, which is in the end no problem for the big multinationals, but a mess for small and medium-sized companies. They don't have the resources to have compliance managers who can look for the various legislation in the countries. Most of the countries in the European Union and the neighboring countries, they have used producer responsibility. But we have three countries with a packaging tax: Hungary, Croatia, and Denmark, with a speciality that Hungary moved from an EPR system to a tax system. Perhaps you know that there is a government in place which is believing in the Hungarian superiority over other countries, and that only the government is the one who can take the right decision. So on the 29th of December 2012, the parliament decided to stop EPR from the 1st of January. Overnight decision. They increased the fees by factor of 5. So instead of 25 million euros a year, industry has to pay now 125 million euros per year. And the responsibility for this money changed in the meantime 4 times. And 3 times the whole staff was fired. You can imagine why? Because money was missing. So industry is very unhappy there. We are doing a lot of lobbying to try to open the door again to EPR. We were a little bit successful because in the meantime you are allowed to individually fulfill your obligation, and then you don't have to pay a tax. You are not allowed to join the forces, but for example, for your commercial packaging, you can in the meantime again fulfill the targets on your own, which is the first step. So there is hope in Hungary. Our friends in the UK, of course, they had to do it in a different way. I don't know. Okay, they are leaving now, so they. But that is always the case. They have to do it different on this island next to Europe. Huh? So they have invented a tradable certificate system. So if you are a recycler, you can ask for a permit to issue for each ton of recycled material. You can issue a piece of paper. And industry is then obliged to buy enough paper to fulfill the targets. And the idea, I think the economic idea behind it is quite good. If the recyclers get more money for their material, their demand to the waste management companies will increase. They will build new capacities for recycling. If the waste management companies get more demand, they will collect more. So problem solved. But it seems that to build new capacities, a recycler needs a certain security. So if you invest 50 million in a new recycling plant, you will need to know that for the next 10 years you have some clients, which is not foreseen in this system because it's, there are no long-term contracts there. So that's why you find that the UK is exporting most of their plastic waste to China, whereas in all the other European countries we have a quite good own recycling industry. The recyclers are complaining all the day. That's normal, but we keep them alive. They have their business, and so this is working. In the meantime, Scotland is discussing to introduce the continent way. Very interesting to see. So another preparation for the split from the UK, even in the waste business. But even if the countries have chosen producer responsibility to implement it, there's a variety of ways how you can do it. You have a lot of countries where obliged industry is running their system. So you have a single service provider who is organizing, usually together with the local authorities, the collection, sorting and recycling. Then we have some countries where you have several PROs, Packaging Recovery Organization. For example, in my home country in Germany, we had the first 15 years, we had one system who did all the investments, and then the people said, let's have 10, perhaps it's better. Ask my colleagues there. I think it's not better, but as I said, I'm a dinosaur and believe in a few things. In the meantime, we will build now on top of the 10 different one, a common association to oversee everything. So you see, sometimes we need monopolies a bit, it seems. Huh? The UK, as I have said, even if you have several PROs, there's a solution that you share one collection infrastructure. In other countries, there's a fight for a district. So the PRO is signing up with one city, the other one with another city, or for antitrust authorities, the Dreamland, it's Estonia, where you have 3 accredited PROs, and they are all together active on the whole territory. So if you go to big squares, you might see 3 plastic containers from the 3 different associations. Whether this makes sense, I will not comment. Huh? But from an antitrust point of view, wonderful. You have on top of the collection system, you have a deposit system for a few beverage containers. Again, not one deposit system is like the other. Again, a lot of variety. In many countries, you concentrate on household packaging. In other countries, you have a system for all the packaging. Industry pays the full cost. Industry pays the share cost. Everything is possible. So wonderful life for consultants. For them, they love this mix of the different systems. As I said, the picture looks very nice, but if you go a little bit more into detail, you will find in every country minimum one big challenge. As I said, the statistics are not really reliable. We really have to work on them. In many countries, you have no enforcement by the government, which is really a disaster. Within a monopoly system, somehow you can keep this under control because the monopoly knows the black sheep, and you can work with them. But if you have a choice of 10, and if you are not obliged to choose one for all your packaging, but you can split your obligation, then the government is usually completely lost. So even in Germany, we have at the moment a free riding percentage of 40%. 40%. And the funny thing is, it's not 40% of the companies, it's 40% of the packaging. So every of the obliged industries somehow do a creative reporting, as you name it. So that's the reason why now they will install this super body to oversee all these 10 systems. Each of the 10 systems, by the way, they have a consultancy who helps obliged industry to be creative in the reporting. And then later the PROs, the mother companies, are complaining that the reports are not right. Okay. In many countries, we still have no infrastructure for the collection, although the systems are active for over 10 years. But if you start with competition, like in Romania, like in Bulgaria, Lithuania, and many of the Eastern European countries, you just concentrate on the low-hanging fruits, and you do not go in the rural areas and so on. You just collect for the fulfillment of your targets. That's it. So still a long way to go in many countries. Transparency. For us, transparency is very important. If we collect so much money from industry, then industry and the inhabitants who later pay the bill, they should know what we do with their money. It should be transparent. In many countries, it's a black hole, completely black hole. They claim that this is a business secret, again, especially in countries with competition. So you know what is going in to the system, like €1 billion a year in Germany, but you do not know what is the margin, what is the administration costs, where's the money going. Everything is a business secret, which means for me a black hole and no transparency. A part of the problem, I have to say, is obliged industry as well. There are some companies which are very active, and some companies which are just follower and always see whether there's a way to escape. But even within the big multinationals, they usually only a very few have a guidance from the headquarter and tell you have to do it in this way. It's very often a local decision, so it depends on the local manager, which is extremely difficult in the small countries. In the small countries, very often the headquarter sends young, engaged, enthusiastic managers. They go to the country for 1 or 2 years. So their focus is to be the good guy, the best guy for 1 or 2 years. If this is a disaster for the long run, they don't care. So this is for EPR, where you usually take long-term decisions. You invest today, so you spend more money today to benefit on the long run. This is really a very difficult situation. So we are trying to work a lot with our industry as well to make them aware that this short-term thinking is completely stupid. And we see in many countries a fight between stakeholders. Sometimes between the local authorities and industry. Local authorities always want more money, more influence. Industry says if we pay the bill, we tell which music is played. So it's, and again, you have to find the balance, which is not so easy. But of course, there are a lot of very good examples in Europe. So I told you about the challenges, but in the end, I think we did already a lot of good steps forward. And in Europe, the top performers, of course, they have in place a real collection system for all various waste streams, not only for packaging, especially the bio waste, the green waste. This seems to be one of the major factors of success. If you get this out of the remaining waste, your quality is immediately 100 times better. And you cannot only rely on EPR. EPR will not solve all your problems. No? There are 100 problems on top, 100 measures on top that can help. But again, this depends a lot on your situation. If you have no structured collection system, how can you talk about pay as you throw? So it's really, as we see it in Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey, a step-by-step approach. We should concentrate a lot on the quality, which is important, and last but most important, clear rules. Who is responsible for what? What is the task of the government? What is the task of the agency, industry, local authorities? You have to really clearly define the role and the responsibility of each player. Then you avoid a fight, and everybody knows what he has to do. I was just told 5 minutes. So yeah, enforcement. If you put a responsibility on someone, you have to enforce it as a government. We tell this to the ministries all over Europe every day, and the Commission is now trying to oblige the member states to have someone in place who is enforcing the legislation. Imagine you have a speed limit on the motorway of 100, but you know for sure that no one will enforce it. So you would drive 200 in Germany. So, okay. Our beliefs for the really successful models are run by obliged industry on a non-for-profit basis. So involve your industry, involve the obliged companies. Then you can work with them to increase the recyclability, etc., etc. This is very important. Transparency, because transparency means trust. Without trust, the system does not work. And then who pays the bill should have a certain control how the money is used. Otherwise, this is no EPR. Then you have a tax system, and then the government should be completely responsible for everything, again, in a transparent way, but don't call it EPR. It is something different. In the end, a very few words now to the next step. This is the current situation, but the Commission is especially concerned with regard to plastics, because the production of plastics is exploding over the last 20, 30 years. You see more and more plastics in the ocean. We all know the discussion. So the Commission really would like to do something. They see that collection is still a problem. Recycling rates are too low. There is still no functioning market for secondary raw material. For PET, no problem. HDPE, no problem. But for a lot of the other plastic streams, you really need markets. And still some hazardous chemicals present. So they did a variety of things. What they did up to now is just the left blue circle. They made a new proposal on waste. The other 4 parts are still missing, and they are still working on it, because this is the difficult part, how to change society to a more circular approach. You can only be circular if you put materials on the market which you can use later on. This is, but they still do not know how to regulate it without stopping innovation, or without just banning, or only to ban this, to ban that. That's not the real approach. So the strategy on plastics should be published in the end of the year, but up to now, as far as we hear, there are no real concrete ideas how to do it really. They believe a lot in bio-based plastics. That seems to be one of the ideas. But you can see the reason is that there are 2 or 3 companies, especially from Italy, they are lobbying like hell. A lot of questions there, a lot of confusion. I also believe that this is the future, but it should be done, I would say, in a more modest and structured way. The new targets for us as the PROs extremely important. What will be our obligations in the future, and especially for plastics, of course, from 22.5 to 55%. This will be a major step. That's why we will have to find solutions in the end for all the plastic materials. That's why the plastic value chain, they founded a consortium, a project called CFlex, where we try to find better ways to collect, sort and recycle flexible packaging. I think we have 40 or 50 companies from the whole value chain trying to work together to improve the situation there. After 1.5 years of the legislative proposal, we are now very close to the, as we call it, Turkish bazaar. You have to understand the European Commission in Europe is the one who has the right to draft and propose legislation. That's what they did December 2015. Then the Parliament and the 28 member states have to make up their minds. The Parliament is ready since February. They have a position. They say we want to change X to Z, and we agree with this. The Council of Member States should find their position within the next days. Then the 3 bodies will sit together, and that's what we call the Turkish bazaar. Then the bargaining is starting. So as you would see, the Parliament is asking for higher targets than the Commission proposed, and the Member States said, oh, we are not able to fulfill it, lower targets. So you can expect they will agree on the Commission proposal. And this is working with all the various fields of discussion. So for lobbyists, this is a horror time, because you cannot predict what will be the outcome. So you can be happy at the moment with your work, but tomorrow everything might be destroyed, and you will be fired by your members. So let's see what will happen with me in the next months. If you read the news, Joachim has left. I was not successful in following the Turkish bargaining. Okay. We concentrate a lot at the moment on the measurement point for recycling, which is nearly more important than the new targets, because you can measure in the end for the extreme, you can measure the collection, or you can measure the output of a recycler with very big varieties. So we are promoting that you measure at the gate of the recycler if the material fulfills certain standards. So not that you put shit in, because then you get shit out. So we want a good bale of plastics, PET bottles. If there's, I don't know, 98% PET inside, then you can count it already as recycled, job done. But if there are 50% other materials in, then you could only count it later on. This is what we're working on at the moment, because this is for us very important, and let's see what will be the outcome. Sorry for being too long, but yeah, a lot to tell. Thanks a lot.